Are you tired of feeling overlooked and underestimated? Hi, I'm Tammy North, the Introverted Executives Coach. If you're an introverted executive or you're ready to rise to senior leadership, but you're struggling to be seen as a high potential, this podcast is for you. Think about your typical day at work. Do you ever have difficulty asking for help? How often do you feel like you are the only one doing all the work that nobody else wants to do? But you know these are things that have to get done. And even if you have a team of people that you could delegate things to, often you think it's easier to just do it yourself than to deal with that imagined discomfort of tasking somebody else or asking for assistance. When people ask you for help or they ask you to do something, do you ever say no? How often are you honest about how you really feel when your boss or coworker asks for your opinion? When somebody upsets you or makes you legitimately angry, do you ever let anybody know that you're not pleased? Do you ever directly provide negative feedback to a coworker or to somebody on your team? Do you run yourself to the bone without asking for any help? If you recognize yourself in this opening and it sounds like your day, it's possible that you're not communicating in an assertive manner. A few months ago, one of my clients seemed to be constantly communicating in a very passive manner. And when I explained to her that I noticed it and what I noticed, she told me that she felt like when she tried to be less passive, that she actually became overly aggressive. And she said she didn't know how to be assertive. It's possible that because she spent so much time in passive mode, that simple assertiveness actually felt aggressive to her. Assertiveness, just the simple act of stating what she wanted, felt very bold. So we talked about that for a while until she started to understand the difference. And when it finally clicked for her, she did start going into the world from a stronger place. She interacted differently. And within 6 months, a lot of things changed for her. She became more respected at work. She was promoted to the next level. She started to make stronger connections in other organizations. She was less frustrated, and her team and her coworkers felt like they were finally being included in what she was doing. She always thought that she was doing them a favor by doing all the work behind the scenes, but they felt like she didn't trust them, and they really did want to help her. So it turns out that it was a win-win. When she became more assertive and communicated honestly, she freed up some of her time to do more strategic planning, and her team felt more included, like she really needed them, and they became more inspired and passionate about the work they do. Communicating assertively also means communicating with clarity. Have you ever had somebody tell you that they thought you said one thing when you really said another thing? This happens when you're wishy-washy in your communication. Sometimes you're trying to be too nice. The reality is, you don't have to be a jerk to be assertive. You just have to speak very plainly, without flowery conversation, and that's not mean. In fact, it is just clarity, and clarity is a blessing. When you're too passive, it leads to unhealthy and uncomfortable relationships. It leads to low self-esteem, feeling like you're at the mercy of other people's decisions. It causes anxiety, stress, resentment builds, and tension builds as well. When you're passive, you shy away from saying what you really think and feel. And in this way, people close to you miss out on knowing who you truly are. When you're too passive, it also means that you internalize this anger and frustration. And trust me, when you do that for too long, it often resurfaces in ways that are way over the top compared to what the initial situation warranted. And at the same time, being too aggressive can also lead to unhealthy relationships and a loss of friendships. So that's the focus of today's episode, helping you to notice if you're too passive or too aggressive, and then to give you steps to notice which way you're leaning so that you can move toward a more assertive version of you. The more often you communicate assertively, the more clearly you will speak, and the more often you will be heard. Also, the more often you will be able to advocate for yourself and for your team. And that's a beautiful thing. So there's 4 core communication styles. The first one is passive, which is what we're talking about. Passive communicators are typically quiet and they don't seek attention. They might act indifferent during debates, and they rarely take a very strong stance on anything. They hardly ever assert themselves. They don't usually share their needs or express their feelings. So it's often very difficult to know when they aren't happy or when they're uncomfortable or when they need help with something. They don't complain, they're easygoing, They're patient and they don't share their opinions. They avoid conflict. They often say, why can't everybody just get along? Or they try to find the good things about everybody. Like, oh, they're so nice. Oh, I really like this person. They believe that it's rude or selfish to say what they want. And you'll know that if this is you, if you think it's rude or selfish to say what you want, and if you worry that you'll upset others if you do assert yourself. The second type of core communication is being aggressive. Aggressive communicators frequently express their thoughts and their feelings, and they tend to dominate conversations, often at the expense of others. An aggressive communicator usually reacts before they think, which can negatively affect relationships, and it decreases productivity in the whole workplace. They're very confrontational. They actively communicate and they even over communicate. And the third type of core communicators are passive aggressive. People who use passive aggressive communication styles tend to express their thoughts and feelings in an unclear or confusing way. They often seem to be passive, but then they later act out of anger in an indirect manner. People who communicate in passive aggressive ways may feel powerless or stuck or resentful in their current circumstances, but they may be unable to address their circumstances directly, and so instead they seek to undermine the source of their resentment with subtle expressions of anger. Passive aggressive behavior may be generally characterized by outward cooperation and internal frustration and resentment. So for instance, if somebody acts like they don't really care what happens next, and then they say something like, oh sure, I'll just do everything. Well, that's passive aggressive. And there's other kind of sarcastic remarks and other things that you might notice from passive aggressive. The fourth core communication style is to be assertive. The assertive style is typically the most respectful and productive type of communication in the workplace. When people are assertive, they seem like they're in control. They seem like they're calm. They seem like they're in charge. They know what they want. They know how to hold their ground. Assertive communicators share their thoughts and ideas confidently, but they are always respectful and polite. So let's give some examples about passive, because I'm really in this episode going to focus on passive, assertive, and aggressive. I'm not going to focus a lot on passive aggressive right now. I think we all know what passive aggressive is. But for the purpose of this episode, I really want to focus on people who are too passive and feel like when they start to become assertive that they're actually aggressive. But there is a big difference between assertive and aggressive. And that's kind of the point I want to get to here, is how important it is if you're too passive to try to move toward assertive, and that assertive is good. Assertive is what you want. So let's talk about if you're too passive, what that sounds like. Some phrases that sound passive they also sound weak. They don't make you sound strong. They make you sound weak. One example is if you're hesitant when you speak. You don't take a position or a stand. You say something like, if it's okay, I would like to share my idea. And then you might go on to actually share your idea. Or you say, yes, I see what you're talking about, but I also see the other side. They both have good ideas. Well, that's passive. If you really have an opinion, if you really like one or the other, say the one you like and why. Oh, well, I hear both sides and I really prefer position 2 because do. Here's all the reasons why. You don't have to say you like both. Okay, another example of a passive phrase is if you start off by adding disclaimers when you talk. Well, I could be wrong, but, well, I don't know. I haven't been in this job very long, but, well, frequently, I'm not technical, but, whenever you start off like that, then you're basically already admitting that you don't know what you're talking about. So why should anybody listen to you? That's a passive way to introduce something. Just say what you're going to introduce. You don't have to give that little disclaimer at the beginning. And then a third example of a passive statement is, imagine somebody walked up to you and they asked you if you could do something. And then right then you think in your head, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this at all. But you smile and you say, okay, no problem. If you say yes when you definitely want to say no, and then you get to work on the thing that you didn't even want to do in the first place, and you just resign yourself to the fact that you have committed to everybody that you're going to do this, and now you're quietly suffering, that is passive. And then have you ever heard yourself say something which basically means you're a blade of grass in the wind? Something like, well, I guess if I were supposed to get that job, it would just happen. Well, things never work out for me. Well, I've been praying and I think that one of these days, if it's supposed to happen, it will. Well, things work out the way they're meant to work out. Luck was on my side this time. I know all those things sound positive, and trust me, I am a Christian and I am religious, and I do believe that God understands why he put us on this earth and where we're meant to be. And I also believe that there are actions that we are supposed to take. We were given talents and skills and knowledge for a reason. And so there are things that we are supposed to do, and we don't have to wait for somebody to tell us to do them. I am one of those people that believes, yes, we're here for a purpose. God put us here for a purpose. And even if he knows exactly where we're going to end up, there are actions we are supposed to take in order to get there. And we should not just sit around and wait for those things to happen. I can give you an example of all 4 of those different styles in action. So let's say you've been in line at Starbucks and then you heard somebody make an order and you heard the cashier say something like, yeah, we're running out of dragon fruit. I think we only have enough dragon fruit for one more order. But dragon fruit is your favorite beverage. But just then 2 college girls cut in front of you in line. So if you're passive, you would just ignore them and think to yourself, well, I really wanted dragon fruit, but they're probably going to order dragon fruit, but that's okay. I guess I'll just get a strawberry. And you don't even do anything. That's passive. If you're passive aggressive, you would start loudly and sarcastically complaining about how rude they are. Well, I guess I'm the only one that notices that the line is back there. Oh, I don't know. I was just here for the first 10 minutes and you just walk in the door and get in front of me. Okay. Saying things like that. That's passive aggressive. There's better ways to handle things. If you're aggressive, then you start yelling at them loudly and you go all Karen on them. Maybe you turn on your phone video and then you threaten them if they don't go to the end of the line and you start yelling for the manager because these people cut. That would be aggressive. But one of the best things that you could do, one of the most appropriate things you could do would be to be assertive. And that would be to say, excuse me, the back of the line is that way. These other 5 people are also in line. I know it's kind of weird the way it's laid out. You may not have noticed. And then look straight at them and just look at the end of the line. Odds are they'll go to the end of the line. So how do you know if you're too aggressive? The reason I want to talk about if you're actually too aggressive is the difference between being assertive and being aggressive. And often people who spend way too much of their time being passive think that assertive is aggressive. Often being assertive is just being clear and concise in your communication, fact-based. So you'll know if you're being too aggressive if you're overly passionate, if you assume that you know all the answers, so you aren't even listening to anybody, if you challenge the wrong people, if you start arguing with everybody, even though these people right here have nothing to do with what actually happened, they just happen to be the people in the room, then why are you arguing with them? They might be on your side. If you start just asking a bunch of questions, who did this? Why did they do it? Where have they been? How long have you been there? You just start, asking a lot of questions, successive questions over and over. And if you get angry and resentful, especially if somebody is perceived to be in charge of you, but you don't think they ought to be in charge of you, this happens a lot. And if you don't want to cooperate or you don't agree with the direction something's going or, something like that, you might resist, you might not be cooperative, maybe you procrastinate, you make mistakes on purpose just to slow things down and to make things difficult for people when there's something you don't want to do. That is aggressive. And if you get hostile or kind of pout or get very cynical, like, I guess we're all going to fail now. And you sort of get cynical and just kind of beat down and kind of mean about it, that's aggressive. And if you make a lot of complaints that you're doing all the work, but nobody appreciates you, you never get awards, there's kind of a fine line between passive aggressive and aggressive. But when you make it sound like you're being attacked, but in reality, you are attacking everybody else, that's definitely moved into aggressive. So then how do you know if you're being too passive? You are definitely being too passive if you consistently downplay your own impact and your own accomplishments. It's one thing to be a leader and to celebrate your team, yes. But I'm talking about if you never, ever take any kind of accolades for your own impact. Or if somebody says something to you and you always kind of like, well, I didn't really do that, or that was somebody else, or even if, let's say you work 50 hours to get something done, and then someone's like, wow, that was really amazing. And you're like, yeah, it just took a couple days. And you sort of like make it sound like it was nothing when it was a big impactful effort. Another way you show that you're passive is if you talk very quietly and then you allow your volume to fall off as you talk. So you need to be able to take deep breaths. If you're a singer, you sort of take a breath that goes all the way down to your diaphragm, and then you speak with confidence. You let the air go across your vocal cords with confidence. How often do you apologize? Do you ever hear yourself apologizing for everything? Like, oh, I'm sorry that happened. Or I'm sorry I didn't send that email. I'm sorry I didn't call you. I'm sorry I didn't print that off. Even though some of these things that you didn't know that it was your job to do. There are some people I have literally heard apologize between 20 and 50 times in one day. There is no way that that person did even 2 things in that entire day that required an apology. Maybe they did 0 things, but yet they apologized upwards of 50 times. If you apologize for everything, you're communicating passively. How often do you let other people talk over you or interrupt you? How often do you put other people's needs above your own? Do you put other people's needs above your own exclusively? Do you seek approval from others before you even talk or share your ideas? How often are you overly trusting of what people say? If you call somebody and ask them a very difficult question and they give you a response, do you just say, "Okay, thank you"? Or do you start asking them questions? Even if it's just questions to gain a deeper understanding for yourself, it's important to do this because if you don't trust your own ability to have a deep enough understanding that you can even ask questions just to gain a deeper understanding, then you are actually being passive because you're not trusting your own ability enough to ask questions and to question their confidence. Some people are overly confident, and therefore you have to be brave enough and bold enough to ask questions. And it can be just for the sole purpose of gaining your own knowledge. But when you do that, you might actually put into question what they just said. And that's okay, because it's not like they aren't telling the truth on purpose, but maybe just by you asking questions, it'll fire a few synapses that they didn't even think about, and they will end up having a deeper understanding themselves. So don't just trust what people say. Ask questions, gain your own understanding, and then in that back and forth, you may actually help the other person describe in more clarity what they were trying to say in the first place. If you find that you're avoiding direct eye contact, you might be passive. Do you hesitate to speak up and advocate for yourself even when you're plainly being disrespected? And even though you demand that people respect others, you rarely demand that they respect you. Why is that? And if you're harder on yourself than almost anybody else is of themselves, and you're definitely harder on yourself than you are on anybody else you know, you're probably being passive. So let's talk about some ways to be assertive. One thing you can do to break out of your passive shell and to become more assertive is to clearly understand, identify, and own the value that you bring to your organization and to your position. When you fully understand that and you fully own it and step into that, that's a very powerful place to be, and nobody can take that away from you. While you're practicing to be more assertive, over-prepare when you know you're going to be attending a meeting or speaking in public. Another thing you do is practice this more assertive language. Practice it every day. Notice when you slip into the passive mode, and then work to remove your passive phrases that you hear yourself say. So like if you're hearing yourself say, excuse me, is it okay if I say a thought? Notice when you say that, and just noticing it is going to be the first thing, but when you hear yourself about to say that, stop yourself and then erase that phrase and just say what you were going to say. And another thing you can do is use I statements that represent that you do have your own personal preferences and your own personal thoughts and ideas. I think, I want, I believe. Work on that more often. And if you are really worried that your new assertiveness will come across as aggressive, there are some ways you can communicate to make sure your colleagues view your assertive behavior as acceptable and not aggressive. One thing you do is after you state your very assertive thought, give the other people around you space to have their say. You don't have to change your previously stated assertive statement, but they can say what they will after that, and it's okay. And then you still stick to your guns about what you think or thought. And then be aware on your part that your new assertiveness could be perceived as a threat. And that's only because people expect you to be passive. But you can head that off at the pass by saying things like, I understand what you're saying, and then say your assertive thing. And you can also say, I see what you mean, and then say your thought, whatever that was, very assertively. In this way, you confirm you heard the other party, you acknowledge the merits of their thoughts, and you remain firm on your comment. If that's what you believe you should do, confirm you heard the other party, acknowledge the merits of their thoughts, and remain firm on your comment, especially if that's what you believe you should do 100%. You can be calm, you can be firm, you can stick to your ground without being aggressive. And then as you remain firm in your position, always say, I'm listening. Use your I listening card in abundance. Hear them. Over communicate that you have indeed heard what they said, and simultaneously stick to your guns. One thing a coach will do for you that you can teach yourself to do is to focus on the literal facts. of what did or did not occur. So whenever somebody's talking to you and whenever you decide to speak, think about what the actual facts are. Everything else is just thoughts and feelings about the facts. And when you stick to the facts, it reduces the emotion out of the situation and keeps things clear. This is a very easy way to increase your assertiveness. Just start asking questions about the facts when people are getting overly emotional or dramatic. Try to reduce the drama as much as you can. Being assertive is a skill that you must learn if you want to rise in your organization. The more assertive you can be without moving into aggression, you will be able to express yourself more effectively. You'll be able to stand up for your point of view while also respecting other people. And you will definitely feel this boost of your own self-esteem the more assertive you are. You will definitely earn other people's respect. Do not underestimate. When you're sweet and nice and passive, people might love you, but they may not see you as a leader. So you need to be able to balance that sweetness and kindness with assertiveness. And this assertiveness that's going to bring the respect for you. And then being assertive will also improve your stress management, partly because you're going to reduce the number of times that you agree to do things that you don't want to do. So this working to be less passive, more assertive, and then understanding the difference between assertive and aggressive is definitely one of the areas a career or an executive coach can help you with. They'll notice what you're doing versus what you think you're doing, and they will be able to show your own words to you. And this is especially helpful if you truly believe that being assertive sounds aggressive. So with or without a coach, just do this one thing, which is try to notice when you communicate passively. Catch yourself and concentrate on communicating assertively more often. You have to be an advocate for yourself as well as others if you want to make your dreams come true. You can connect with me at Introverted Executive on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. If you're ready for executive coaching to help you achieve your biggest career goals, subscribe to my weekly Rise and Shine newsletter. There, you'll find out when my program opens for new clients, and you'll also receive weekly tips and activities to continue to make a bigger impact in your own powerful way. You'll find all the information and links down in the show notes. See you next week.